The only one we haven't been able to get to yet is Russia. I'm not happy, and I will tell you that Ukraine wants to do something.
It's been almost 6 months since Trump's inauguration, when he promised he'd measure his success by the war he ends, and the ones he never gets into. Now, however, that speech has come back to bite him like a boomerang that's coated in a harsh dose of reality, because far from what he expected, Vladimir Putin hasn't shown any real interest in negotiating or easing up his attacks on Ukraine. In fact, it's been the opposite. He's ramped them up.
Russia intensifies its air war in Ukraine. The increase comes as President Trump has expressed frustration at Russian President Vladimir Putin's seeming unwillingness to enter talks to end the war.
Trump's entire strategy for the war in Ukraine has completely blown up. Just last week, Russia launched the biggest drone attack of the entire war. Around 1,200 drones and dozens of missiles fired at Kyiv and other cities over just 2 nights. And this past weekend wasn't calm either. Putin is hitting hard, trying to overwhelm Ukraine's defenses with cheaper and cheaper drones, and the consequences have been brutal. Just in the last few days, dozens of Ukrainian civilians have been killed or injured. And for the first time, Trump actually seems genuinely angry about the whole situation.
And it should be stopped. And so if it's not done, if we don't have an agreement in 50 days, that's what we're doing. Secondary tariffs. And they're biting. And I hope we don't get to the point where we do. But I've been hearing so much talk. It's all talk. It's all talk, and then missiles go into Kiev and kill 60 people. It's got to stop. It's got to stop.
What exactly does secondary sanctions mean? In this video, we're going to explain everything. But here's what's even more surprising. Trump has just announced a brand new plan to rearm Ukraine, and we're talking about Trump's first major initiative, specifically focused on strengthening Kyiv's defenses. And this marks a major shift, not just because it's good news for Zelensky's team, which it is, but because it brings this administration a lot closer to the approach used by Joe Biden's White House. But here's the crucial question. What exactly does Trump want to do now? What's his plan to rearm Ukraine? Is it the same playbook the previous administration used? Well, spoiler alert, no, it's not the same. This is a Trump-style plan, and we're about to break down everything we know so far, and a whole lot more. So, let's dive in. There's been another sharp turn. Trump's United States now seems ready, once again, to push for sending weapons to Ukraine to help defend against Moscow's attacks. But it's not going to be a gift. Ukraine won't be footing the bill either. This isn't Biden's old policy, and it's not what Trump was asking for just a few months ago. This time, it's the European countries who will be picking up the tab.
And it means the Europeans paying for it. And again, I mentioned all these countries, we will deal with that. And exactly as you said, it might also mean that countries will move equipment fast into Ukraine, and then the US later backfilling it, because speed is of the essence here. So really, thank you. This is important.
Yes, basically the deal seems to be the following. European countries will send a bunch of weapons to Ukraine from their own stockpiles, and the United States will sell them weapons to replenish those same stocks. Details are scarce, and it's unclear whether Washington will prioritize deliveries from new military production to Europe or, more logically, supply them with equipment from its own arsenals. Either way, on the surface, this looks like a political win for Trump. On one hand, no United States money is being spent. On the other, he gets to say he's putting pressure on Putin. And domestically, he can sell it to his base as a plan, where the Europeans are the ones footing the bill for Ukraine's defense from now on. But what exactly are we talking about here? Well, based on what's already been reported, the first military package is worth around $10 billion. And many of you are probably wondering, is that a lot or not? To give you some context, Washington has spent about $70 billion on military aid since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began in February 2022. So yes, a $10 billion arms package is significant. But what are the Europeans planning to spend that money on? In other words, what on earth are they going to send to Ukraine? Well, to start with, this first package will focus mainly on Patriot air defense systems and their missiles. In fact, pay close attention to this.
With Patriot systems, missiles may arrive in Ukraine within days, Trump says.
This could mark a major shift in Ukraine's defense. Right now, Ukraine operates between 6 and 8 Patriot missile batteries, which are widely seen as the most advanced in the world. On top of that, they also use other air defense systems from different countries, like Germany's Iris-T, for example. Well, now the US president is suggesting that a whole bunch of new batteries could be on the way. Why is this such a big deal? Because these are considered the best missile defense systems out there right now. And what exactly are they like? Well, each battery includes radar and control systems, a power unit, several launchers, and support vehicles.
This system is designed to intercept a wide range of threats, from aircraft to tactical ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, depending on the type of interceptor used. When the radar, which has a range of about 150 kilometers, detects a threat, it sends a signal to the control center, which then activates the rest of the battery to prepare for launch. At that point, 2 types of missiles come into play: the older PAC-2, which uses a fragmentation warhead that explodes near the target, and the more advanced PAC-3, which directly hits the target for a kinetic kill.
And here's the thing, while the Patriot system wasn't originally designed to intercept hypersonic weapons, and its manufacturer hasn't officially confirmed that it can, Ukrainian forces have already managed to shoot down Russian Kinzhal hypersonic missiles. Thanks to its precision and its apparent ability to counter hypersonic threats, it's become the most sought-after air defense system by Kyiv in recent years. And now it finally looks like a significant number of Patriot batteries, along with their missiles, are on their way, funded by several European countries and Canada, which has also expressed interest in joining this rearmament plan. Obviously, a weapons package like this is a massive undertaking. To give you an idea, a single missile used by the system can cost anywhere between $2 and $4 million. Yeah, you heard correctly, up to $4 million a piece. And each full system costs around $400 million. So yeah, a big chunk of that initial $10 billion package will be spent on Patriots alone. But here's the issue. Sending Patriots to Ukraine will definitely be helpful, no doubt, but it's not a long-term solution. First, because the US only produces between 500 and 600 interceptors per year. And second, as I just mentioned, they're extremely expensive. It's a shame that, nearly 3.5 years after the war started, we're not talking about more realistic and sustainable options. But anyway, I say this because obviously neither the US nor European countries are going to empty their stockpiles. So in reality, not that many interceptors will make it to Ukraine. That said, even if Patriots make up most of this first package, they won't be the only thing Zelensky's country will receive. Check out what Rutte had to say.
It's broader than Patriots. It will mean that Ukraine can get its hands on really massive numbers of military equipment, both for air defense, but also missiles, ammunition.
There aren't many details on this yet, but apart from Patriots, Ukraine would also receive artillery shells and various types of missiles. And that might actually be even more important for putting real pressure on Putin, so watch out. Ukraine could soon have a lot more firepower to strike back. That's all we know for now. But what is clear is that this plan, though funded by European countries and not directly by the Trump administration, could provide significant support to Ukraine in the coming months. At least, the goal is clear: to weaken the impact of Russian airstrikes and strengthen Ukraine's defensive position. Why? Well, the reality is that while Trump says he's angry and disappointed with Putin, he's still leaving the door open to dialogue. In fact, Trump has issued a direct ultimatum to the Russian dictator: 50 days to strike a peace deal with Ukraine, or Moscow will face serious consequences. We'll talk about Trump's deadlines in a while. But first, what kind of consequences is the president actually talking about? Well, mainly tariffs. Tariffs of 100% on Russian imports, and they could go as high as 500%. And apparently, those tariffs might come with a little surprise. Listen up.
The ultimatum.
According to several sources close to the Kremlin, Putin is now convinced that his army can overpower Ukraine's military in the coming months. That's why he's ramping up efforts to wear down the Ukrainians with non-stop air attacks. Up until now, the Russian president had the wind at his back, because sitting in the White House was a guy who pretty much looked the other way, delayed arms shipments to Ukraine, and even echoed Kremlin talking points, going as far as blaming Ukraine for the invasion. Everything was going great for Putin. He couldn't have asked for more. Trump's presidency was a gift straight from heaven. The thing is, whether it was due to incompetence, political inexperience, or something else, Trump became obsessed with ending the war quickly, through a negotiated settlement at any cost. The problem? Russia isn't even remotely interested in that kind of deal, unless it basically amounts to total victory for them. So of course, there was no agreement, and no real progress either. For Trump, the war is turning into a major nuisance. It's starting to feel like a real burden on his agenda. And suddenly, boom, we get the plot twist we've been telling you about.
And we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs. You know what that means.
He didn't beat around the bush. The president, in that unique mix of luxury car salesman and battlefield general, just laid down what's probably the most serious threat he's made so far in this conflict. According to the president, if there's no peace agreement, or at least substantial progress within 50 days, the United States will impose a 100% tariff on Russian imports. Now, here's the problem. The US barely imports anything from Russia. We're talking about a trade flow of just $3 billion. That's negligible. So clearly, that alone wouldn't do much. That's why the White House isn't just talking about direct tariffs, but also so-called secondary tariffs. In other words, tariffs on countries that keep doing business with Russia. And that, obviously, could be a serious blow to the Kremlin. The problem, let's be honest, it's hard to believe. Implementing secondary tariffs and enforcing them would amount to declaring a full-blown trade war against countries like China, India, Turkey, Kazakhstan, and half of Asia. And keep in mind, trade between China and Russia alone is worth over $250 billion a year, and Beijing has no intention of reversing that anytime soon. So again, it's hard to believe the US would walk into that kind of mess. And there's precedent here. Washington hasn't been able to stop oil trade between Iran and China. Thinking they could pull it off now on a much bigger scale seems like wishful thinking. The same goes for India and even Turkey. If the US went down that road, we'd likely see so many exceptions that the whole thing would lose its bite. Just look at what's happening with energy. Russia has found new ways and routes to sell its oil and gas, mainly through a massive shadow fleet and offering deep discounts. While Europe has scrambled for new energy suppliers, others have been lining up to buy cheap Russian crude. And the problem is, even if Trump could stop it, it's hard to imagine he'd want to. Why? Because pulling Russian oil off the market would spike prices and fuel inflation, the exact opposite of what he's promising. Still, this time Trump didn't just threaten tariffs. He also took the opportunity to throw a few barbs at the Kremlin. Take a look.
I go home, I tell the First Lady, I spoke to Vladimir today. We had a wonderful conversation. She said, oh, really? Another city was just hit. So it's like, look, he's... I don't want to say he's an assassin, but he's a tough guy.
In any case, Trump has made it clear that tariffs aren't his first option. They are the last resort after everything else has failed. Up until now, one of the main criticisms was that sanctions and weapons deliveries were moving on separate tracks, with no coordination or clear strategy linking the military and economic fronts. But what we're seeing now is a bit different. This time, Trump is actually talking about a deadline, although the obvious issue is that he never sticks to his deadlines. And more importantly, and this is crucial, he seems to be giving the green lights to Europe's plans to step up arms deliveries to Ukraine, which of course is something Putin is not going to like. So for that reason alone, this seems like good news. Of course, Washington's pressure strategy doesn't stop there. Take a look.
Senator Lindsey Graham says sanctions bill would give Trump a sledgehammer against Russia amid turning point in war with Ukraine.
For weeks now, Congress has been slowly cooking up its own recipe to give Moscow a serious scare. We're talking about the Sanctioning Russia Act of 2025, already known informally as the Graham Act. You see, Senator Lindsey Graham, a guy known for flip-flopping, is behind a tough new sanctions bill against Russia. So, what does this proposed law actually say? Well, it calls for even harsher sanctions, including a 500% tariff on any country that continues to buy oil, gas, uranium, or basically anything that smells like Russian energy. Yes, you heard correctly, 500%. And don't forget, Russia is essentially a raw materials exporter, especially of hydrocarbons. And what about the banks, the financial intermediaries, or those buddies still buying, I don't know, Russian government bonds? Same deal. Which, logically, if passed, would be almost like a declaration of war, because this time it would directly hit the very foundations of the Russian economy. And not only that, it could very well trigger a massive global recession.
Ultimately, there are only three plausible outcomes: a retreat by Russian forces, a meltdown in global energy markets, or a worldwide recession owing to a tailspin in global trade. There are no other outcomes. For this reason, the bill should be considered both courageous and risky.
Well, this bill appears to have strong bipartisan support. According to Graham, his proposal already has more than 80 co-sponsors, meaning over 80 senators are backing it. And don't forget, the US Senate has just 100 seats. Of course, the bill has another small problem. It's not backed by the White House, and frankly, it doesn't seem very credible. It looks more like a political pressure tactic than a real actionable plan. In fact, the bill doesn't directly impose those punishments. It simply gives the president the option to activate them, which, naturally, doesn't mean he will. And even so, the White House currently doesn't support passing the bill. In fact, what the White House is asking for is full flexibility for the president to act however he sees fit. And let me say it again, sweeping secondary tariffs doesn't seem credible. The world still needs Russian oil and gas. Europe depends on Russian enriched uranium, and Rosatom continues to supply nuclear fuel for 19 reactors in the European Union. So any real alternative would mean accepting a massive recession, something I highly doubt Trump is willing to risk, and would come dangerously close to a declaration of war. Think about it. If you push Russia to the brink and threaten the regime's survival, where do you think that leads Putin? Most likely, if you corner him that hard, there's a serious risk he'll lash out in a major way to force a global reset. That's something to watch out for. And that's not even getting into how on earth you'd force China to comply with this kind of restriction. Bottom line, the most likely scenario is that this is just another pressure strategy. Either way, you can see it clearly. There's definitely a change of direction. It may not be a radical change for now, but it's clear proof that Trump's original approach has been a complete failure. What matters though is that this is good news for Ukraine. Of course, it also wouldn't be surprising if those 50 days went by and nothing happened. Trump could just extend the deadline again, like he's already done multiple times with his infamous tariffs around the world. Still, I'll say it again. Ukraine getting more military support is a good thing. The question, or rather the questions now, are, will this be enough to force real peace talks between Russia and Ukraine? Who do you think has the upper hand right now? And do you believe Trump will actually follow through with his threat once the deadline passes? Let us know what you think in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to VisualPolitik if you haven't done so already. As always, thank you so very much for watching. Take care. I'll see you next time.